Hey everybody, this is Sean from Low Code Approach. Before we hop in today's episode, I want to let you know that we are collecting everyone's thoughts on what topics we should cover for the upcoming season. To submit them, hopefully you're not driving. If you are, wait until you get somewhere safe. But go to aka.ms/, low code topic request. That's all one word. aka.ms/, low code topic request. And from there, enter what topics you'd like us to cover in the upcoming season. And who knows, maybe we'll be able to get to them and get to the best people at Microsoft to talk to. Anyway, thanks for listening. We're excited to get your thoughts. Hey everybody, welcome to a new episode of the Low Code Approach. I am Sean Feeney, a Senior Product Marketing Manager on the Power Platform team, and I'm joined by...
I'm Wendy Haddad. I'm a Senior Cloud Solution Architect, a Delivery Lead, and a former Microsoft customer. And I am joined by...
Ken Aguilar, Principal Program Manager and sometimes substitute weatherman for Houston, Texas, where we have just been drowning in crazy weather right now. With us today, we have John Landgrave and Chris Simmons. We will not let Chris introduce himself first. We will go straight to John. John, how are you today?
I'm doing well, Ken. I'm on our global black belt team and work with our largest customers on enterprise integration and governance strategies. Okay, Chris, you're up.
And if I'm allowed to go last, Chris Simmons, I am a principal technology specialist focused on the Power Platform. I work with our Southern U.S. enterprise commercial customers.
Chris is in Dallas, y'all, so he's been having some weather.
Oh, yeah. Up in Dallas, also having some fun weather challenges.
Oh, yeah. Well, so long as you guys have power, we'll keep you on the show. Chris and John, thank you so much for joining. So at the time of this recording, we just wrapped up Build. And there was a whole bunch of news that came out around Build regarding Copilot, and also Copilots. So if you didn't check out any of that, or if you did have time to go and review that, hopefully our listeners were able to go and take a look at Jared's blog post and Omar's blog post and Narav's blog post to get an update of all the great stuff and Charles's blog post. But John and Chris, how did you guys take Build? What did you take away from that? How did that shape your thoughts on Copilots and security and governance with like Security Hub announcement for Power Platform? Like, what do you guys think about that? John, let's start with you.
I was actually more focused on things like the Security Hub. I work with a lot of large customers, and they're really looking for ways to manage at scale. And so as they begin building out their infrastructure and wanting to delegate responsibility to different groups, they just need more tools for oversight. And so, we're moving in that direction. Things like Security Hub are the right place to go to be. Having a Copilot hub as well is going to be helpful because it's right now they have to kind of find the different settings in different places. So having one place to go view that is also going to be a big plus for them.
And Chris, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, there's lots of exciting things when it comes to Copilot. We've gone full Oprah here, right? Everybody can get a Copilot for everything and everywhere, taking advantage of all kinds of capabilities. So I get the opportunity to talk to customers a lot about that stuff. But like John, very passionate about the governance and security side, right? Knowing that we have former customers not only within Microsoft helping customers directly, but being part of the product group. It really gives us a better perspective on, how people are actually using this stuff. So things like Security Hub, being that evolution of that customer feedback was really exciting. And even kind of one of the maybe smaller announcements mentioned right before Build was data policies or soon to be connector management capabilities of Copilot Studio and some of the additional governance and security controls around that were announced just before Build. So lots of exciting stuff right now.
You both are on the front lines, and I'm curious because a lot of companies are concerned about the Oprah, everyone gets a Copilot, especially from the governance lens. And John, I know you mentioned this, and Chris, you alluded to this before the call as well. Do you feel that the announcements that were made at Build and some of the direction of the product is addressing those concerns? Are you seeing companies start to maybe sign up for the previews or start to try to implement some of these technologies? Or do you think that there's still some consideration maybe in terms of strategy or rethinking their strategies that need to happen?
Well, there's definitely still concern. The approach I generally take with customers, though, is to encourage them to use kind of a crawl, walk, run methodology. And part of that has to do with discovering what they can do in a smaller group and then moving beyond that once they have policies around them. Most of the mistakes I see with customers, frankly, is they try to go all in up front with not really understanding what the ramifications are of those all in decisions. So to the extent that they adopt in that manner, it's good. The other thing I really try to emphasize to customers is that governance is really three things. It's what you can and can't do, what you may and may not do, and what you should and should not do. And so really thinking about it in terms of there are things you can control with, switches and knobs in the interface, which is can and can't. And then there are things you need to control with policy, because we're not ever going to have a switch and a knob for everything. So you need to have policies that show people, press this button, get a pink slip immediately if you violate kind of policies. And then you have the best practices, or the should and should not. And going into any new technology, putting those three boundaries around it gives you a way to cover all of the possibilities. And this has been true as far back as SharePoint, right? I mean, I was a big kind of SharePoint guru and an early adopter on that side too. And so we tried to implement the same methodology around recognizing what you can control and what you have to control with policy.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Big fan of that message, right? Education is key. Getting out in front, letting people know, right? Our users are creative, right? Our customers, users, the people out in the doing their day-to-day job are very creative human beings. They will find a way to solve their problem. And if you don't give them a better answer, they're going to choose the one that you fear the most. So it's all about making the easy answer the right answer wherever possible. I know that's, pie in the sky to say, but helping customers kind of get there, educating and making them aware of some of these things, right? John talks about customers that go all in and some that are super conservative on holding back. And I don't think either of them are the right answer necessarily, but I still understand that, customers and businesses have to move at their own pace. So helping them understand what's reality. There's a lot of opinions out there, of course, and so helping them understand what the platform really does and how it really works. The term Copilot is so overused at this point already that it's really critical to ensure that they understand what each Copilot does and their purpose. If I may, brief plug in our own series, we have the Power Platform Master Series, where we address that, demystifying Copilots by addressing the different styles of Copilots that exist and their general purpose and how they work.
Okay, so I'm going to play the role of admin or CISO because I hear this all the time. You're both giving me a solution of policies or depending on my people rather than being able to flip the knobs and switches, which I really, really like the knobs and switches. And so Ken and team are working hard to provide those baseline security tools, right? And we've got a lot of announcements, and Ken, you can even speak to some of them, and we've had other episodes. But this is an uncomfortable area for a lot of customers around the policy side. And can you talk a little bit more about how they should think about policies? You phrase it as a good thing. I think a lot of security teams look at that as a negative thing. And so where do they draw that line and how do they craft it?
The first thing to recognize is that we do have a lot of places in the platform to set kind of least privilege. So making sure connectors are blocked when they're not in use and only enabling them in environments where they are enabled, being able to limit people's access to certain areas. But the reality is there's never going to be a button and switch for everything. And so where I kind of draw the line is have people think about business value first. So be specific about initiatives you're running, go for the high value things first, and recognize, and in the organization, you have to be clear that just because you're given a tool doesn't mean it's the right time to use that tool. I think Microsoft marketing does a great job, but to be clear, what we think is viral marketing, our customers think as virus marketing. And so, we probably should take a more hardline stance around turning things on by default. That number one complaint I get from customers is things get turned on and they don't even know they're there. And so as a company, we need to figure out how to manage our needs to help people be aware of things versus their needs to protect their corporate assets. And Office has figured that out. Office is not on by default in most cases. But it is not just an education job for the company to their customers, but also the Microsoft in the field, our job to educate our customers about what's coming and how to be prepared. So we probably need to be involved earlier in those discussions rather than them waking up one morning and figuring out their co-pilots floating around.
I'm going to let Chris respond first, but my ears just got warm and I leaned in when John said some things. So buckle up, folks.
I was listening to John's response. I was like, "Oh, Ken's having a blast, and maybe Sean's a little raising an eyebrow there in the corner." It's like, "Hey, what do you mean? Shots fired?" I think. No, and spot on, right? We do a great job talking about what we can do, and I think we just need to be as equal about what we can help them do to prevent those creative users, to prevent those wild things, that we're not just doing governance through thoughts and prayers, right? It's got to be more than that. It's got to be a lot of knobs and switches. We do have those, and we've come a long way in that conversation, thanks to folks like Ken and others, to add more of those knobs and switches up front, turning more things off by default, or at least making it really easy and quick to turn those things off. A little bit more of the proactive governance. There's a lot more coming in perspective.
Just as important as knobs and switches, though, is visibility.
Oh, 100%.
And that's the thing.
Yeah.
That's most customers would prefer we give a view of everything happening and then have the knobs and switches than have knobs and switches that aren't intuitively obvious as to how they should apply them. And that's, I think, the biggest frustration is a lack of vision into their exposure, not that we can necessarily limit their exposure.
100%, right? We talk about the Excel files that are flying around all the time, right? It is the CISOs don't necessarily have their head in the sand, but a little bit, right? They know Excel's out there. They know their users are using it at scale, but they don't know what's in those Excel files, how many they are. We're trying to help, but at the same time, if this goes back to my statement about giving them a better tool, making the right solution the easy one. If we can give them where they can have that visibility, like the capabilities of the platform, right, then they're going to use those things. And now there's a visibility. So even with the knobs and switches, our creative users are going to find a way to try to take advantage of things. But if we give them that path, then we can at least see what they're doing to address the need. It doesn't change the fact that these people are trying to solve challenges. And that's really where we're starting from, is that a business person doing their job has a problem, and they're going to solve that problem one way or another. So how do we make that problem easily solved, securely, and safely, right, for both the individual and the company? So, there's not a perfect answer that we can put a bubble around everybody, but we're doing a lot of great things with the knobs and switches, with the visibility, and then helping customers, define those strategies so that they can put themselves in a safe spot.
And I don't think we necessarily have the answer for everything, Chris, but we do listen and very much value the feedback of our customers. To that point, we recently released a white paper where we talk about tenant strategies and so on. And when you look at it and read over the document itself, there's a lot of principles and guidelines and things inside of there. Everything from how to set up your groups and routing strategy to talking about ALM and so on. Customers often ask for extreme prescriptive guidance. And that's not something that we can necessarily give to you because, quite frankly, we don't know your business. We can take a guess, but we don't specifically know that, which is why we provide these tools that offer flexibility and so on. Also, to John's point, there's no way possible for us to create a knob for everything. There just simply isn't. Some of our customers become very, very creative, and they create their own tooling. Sometimes they even reverse engineer some of our APIs. Hey, folks, that's not supported, by the way. We don't just don't do that.
Not going to stop them, Ken. We keep telling.
I know.
What, you mean I can do that, Ken? Ken just said I could reverse engineer APIs.
That's not what I said, John. That is not what I said. It requires a lot of effort. But
you said I can, but I may not.
Yes, I said do not do that, please.
Not supported.
Right?
Not supported.
Go the supported route. Right.
This is great marketing, by the way. Thank you.
Well, of course, Sean, we want you to maintain your job.
Hey, Sean, we give people flexibility.
That's right. Yes.
Absolutely.
We give our customers options. Whether they choose to take them, it's a whole different conversation.
Yeah, I'm curious, though. Wendy mentioned that you all are on the front lines. I'm going to put you both on the spot. What's the biggest ask that you get from customers? Like, solve this for me.
I can give you that because I was trying to figure out a way to work it in. So thanks, Ken. I'll give you your segue dollar later. Before I give you the ask, I want to kind of set the frame here. We are moving from predominantly productivity use of our platform to a new way of using the platform as an enterprise low-code tool. It is both exciting and terrifying for our largest customers. It is exciting because the opportunity to help solve their backlogs and to do it in really creative ways where maybe even they don't need forms anymore because they can use copilots to accomplish the same things is exciting. It's inclusive. It gets more people using the platform. It's frightening because there are 50 years of enterprise best practices built into things like layering solutions and reusing capabilities and those things. But we have not, nor necessarily can we, to your point, Ken, done a lot of work on saying, here's the right way to implement this enterprise technology with lifecycle management and also do things like solution layering in a way that enables low code but protects enterprise assets. And so a lot of the work I've done in the last 3 or 4 months with some of our largest customers who are adopting this is saying, well, how do you build things that is solutions integration layers that protect enterprise assets, but then expose those assets to low code developers for reuse in Copilots and in Power Apps and in Power Pages, et cetera, right? And so there's this whole nother set of guidance around how do you effectively use low code as another tool in enterprise adoption and development, as opposed to a separate path to the same solution. And so, we do need to get crisper over time. It's not, again, we're at the beginning of this journey that people have to recognize from the beginning of this journey, you're not putting things at risk by adopting enterprise mode and building this out. You're setting a foundation that will allow you to build taller buildings. And so you have to be willing to make that investment to build that foundation. But they want to know that there is a path to get there. I recognize we can't give a lot of prescriptive guidance based on the difference in companies, but we certainly can say, based on how you build enterprise applications today, we've provided you with a significant set of plumbing with pipelines and with some of the features with groups and routing. We're going to give you more, but we also have to look at the other side, which is what is the right strategy for how you build enterprise apps with low code as part of that strategy. And it's not, because if it's a separate path, we won't succeed, right? It has to be part of their overall enterprise IT mission. It can't be another way to get around IT. Part of that we have to figure out, help customers. And that's what customers are asking me to help.
You had a great comment, several great comments, but the one I keyed in on was about the fear and the frightening aspect of this now being an enterprise level tool. So let me say the Power Platform has always been an enterprise level tool. It's just that, maybe we just are just outright saying it right now. And recently I was listening to some customers, and without naming the customer, they were from Brazil, and they asked, how does Power Platform discourage shadow IT? Because they see Power Platform as a shadow IT enablement tool. And Chris, back to your point, I asked specifically about Excel in their organizations and how many of them are running, on Excel and, the world's greatest database. Shouts out to Excel. Love you guys. It is a phenomenal tool and folks love to use it. But at the same time, how many of us know, as you said, what's inside of those Excel files right now? Who wants to talk a little bit about the fear and maybe the anti-shadow IT part of Power Platform?
Well, if I may, I think there's two major factors to it, right? So one of your recent guests, Mr. Eric Denton, had a wonderful phrase. And I don't know if he said it on the last episode. I apologize. I haven't heard it yet. He went out with a message early on and said, Microsoft is the problem. We created this problem. We created Excel. We created Access databases. Excel is the world's greatest ERP solution, and no one can argue that fact. And I laughingly go into customers and tell them, I'm here to kill Excel, right? Now, I'm sure Sean's like just losing his mind over here. But, I want to take Excel out of their hands. And not because Excel's bad. I love Excel. It's a great tool. But that is an enabler, right? But we have so many flexible solutions that we can do with that. So if we're giving them a better tool that they can see, to John's point earlier about visibility, right? That's the key. You can't solve the Excel problem because you can't find them all. I mean, sure, there's ways, generally speaking, but that's a Herculean effort. And you don't know if it's being used and what data it's in it, right? So we're solving that problem by giving you Power Platform. This is our love letter back to those same people going, I'm sorry, here's the better answer, where they have 100% visibility, where they have the opportunity to figure out and review and understand what kind of data exists in these repositories, right? Because John says it perfectly, right? We have moved into the enterprise realm. We have always been the enterprise grade, right? The origins of the platform coming from things like Dynamic CRM. So, we've already been at that enterprise grade capability from the front end and user perspective. We're adding more to that, supporting layer so that they have even more access and visibility into controlling and monitoring the solution. But that's part of the challenge. The other part of the challenge, and it's not something I talk about very often anymore, but it did come up recently, where it was the traditional pro dev, like I'm afraid that I'm not going to, you're taking away my job kind of conversation. And I'm sure that topic comes up all the time. And then I remind them, your backlog is infinite, right? Like you've never been bored as a pro dev in this world. It just doesn't exist. It's so full that there are countless, if not billions of things on that backlog that aren't on the backlog because they're never going to make it to a level of priority that you're ever going to see it as a pro developer. One story I heard, in the last few months was a field technician that was tracking device installations and maintenance through a clipboard. And this person decided they were sick and tired of doing it on a clipboard and then keying it into an Excel spreadsheet or a SharePoint list, I don't remember, when they got back to their desk, and said they learned how to create Power Apps. They created one, used, simple AI builder model to take a picture of this thing, pull the data off of its serial number, model number, all that stuff, and automatic route it to Dataverse. But then, because of the fact that they were using their device, they were able to get geolocation, so they could track it physically, then they could build maps on top of it. So what started as just a simple clipboard to Excel turned into, not only is this process more efficient, the whole thing has changed, right? We've revolutionized how we just install devices out in the field. That was never going to make it to the backlog of that pro dev ever, right? Because it was, A, it was too small. B, the snowball of requirements, right? It would just, the scope creep would just explode so fast, and, it would just never get done. Those are the solutions where the people that are closer to the problem can solve without needing the pro devs, but then getting the opportunity to include the pro devs when they're needed. Because there's going to be a situation where they're going to be involved. They'd have to be for some of these higher scale, bigger impact situations. And so there you go, right? It's not shadow IT at that point if you can see it, right? There is no shadow.
But I do want to put, as Chris said, there really are two classes of solutions. There are the solutions that kind of filter from I'm the closest person to the problem and I'm empowered to solve it. But there are also solutions, and I do a lot of work with our team that has the SAP connector. There are these huge opportunities to take the data in these enterprise data stores and make them available for the people closest to the problem to solve. The problem is we are enterprise grade. That doesn't mean we're always enterprise aware. And what I mean by that is the frightening thing for someone who manages their SAP installation is that they give a developer direct access to SAP. They don't know what they're doing and they start deleting production data. And so again, they shouldn't be doing it that way. I mean, they should be setting up development servers. They should be configuring an integration layer that masks the connector itself so that people using that integration layer are accessing SAP, but they're not doing it by putting in a specific credential that gives them access to more than they should have. And this is what I mean. This is where the fear is that fear is based in ignorance, right? Which means that if we are able to tell folks, we do have a way to do this, and this is the right way to do it, to let people access your enterprise assets, then we are not just enterprise grade, we're enterprise aware, but we're not there yet. And so we really need to be more focused on making sure that we're providing the level of guidance that allows enterprises to be comfortable that they can protect their enterprise assets. Because if we don't do that, it will be a while before they allow those assets to be consumed in what are fantastic front-end capabilities with things like Copilot. So this is not an issue of whether we have the technology. Again, there's people, process, and technology. It's not a technology issue. It's a people and process issue. We just have to be aware that for large enterprises who have IT teams whose job is to protect the crown jewels, they're not going to let us in the vault unless there are already protocols in place to allow those things to be accessed.
And I will just, one quick add to that is that at the same time, though I 100% agree with that, that's not a reason to shut out the entire platform. Maybe you don't use it.
I agree.
Those
you're right.
There's still millions of other things that you could do with it.
Right? Absolutely.
I feel like we're missing a third player in this. So I'm so glad we're talking about Shadow IT because Ken and Sean know how much of a soapbox this is for me because I live this. No, but seriously.
You used to be Shadow IT.
Well, I used to be the person in the middle.
Yeah, right? Shots fired again.
I don't even know you, and I'm not sure anymore. No, but seriously, like it was in the middle, right? Because as a product and service manager, you're getting all these use cases, and you see what the business need is, but then you also sit in between the customer and security and, your CISOs, and you're having these reviews and legal, and you see the privacy implications and you see the scary thing. I wonder if we're leaving out a player. This is a theory I have, so feel free to dismantle it or disagree or add to it. But it's been something I've been noodling on a bit here, where with the topic of shadow IT, we keep focusing on or security has visibility into what's going on as an all-up entity. We talk about the end user who's creating shadow IT, but a lot of times IT is very far removed from the business. And I wonder if there's more of a concept here where governance is a team sport. And I've seen organizations and been in organizations where it's either centralized, IT owns everything, or security owns everything, and nothing happens. And decisions are being made removed from that backlog or the understanding why. Or it's the individual business segments have some visibility. And now with environments, you do have reporting into what's going on and can make those decisions in terms of governance being closer to the need that's causing shadow IT. Because you could say, oh, Power Platform causes shadow IT, lock it down, and then people are going to just go create Google Sheets or Smart Sheets or whatever, Trello, whatever is free is happening. So you're not actually solving the problem. You're kind of playing whack-a-mole as people are trying to solve it. And I just wonder if we focus too much on IT versus end user and not really talk about the business leaders with the individual business units in the role of IT and how to incorporate them.
Let me jump in on that one, Wendy. I think, first of all, I'm totally stealing governance as a team sport and trademarking it for myself just so that Wendy won't make any profits off of that really quick.
I see a shirt coming.
You heard it here first.
Exactly.
I got you, Wendy.
I might have to do that. Just make a shirt, governance as a team sport, Wendy Haddad, right down there at the
Sure, I
bottom.
probably adjusted it from somewhere
perfect.
subconsciously.
Let me say that, Wendy, I think your comments have been spot on and they're well received. Chris and John, would you say that from your interactions in the front line, the makers themselves feel that we don't give them enough visibility from the governance aspect, right? Like we do things in managed environments where an admin can use, say, like maker welcome message to put a policy in their face and so on. But do you feel that we should invest more in, as Wendy said, sort of doing things as a team by giving them their own view of the admin center, but from a maker perspective, where they can look at their resources and review things and say, oh, this app is underperforming. Here's a suggestion. I should change the code this way or something along those lines. And I'm theorizing here, right? I'd love to get your takes on this.
I haven't seen that, frankly. If you said, here's $100, where should I invest it? Like if that's the approach we took.
Yeah.
I would say our investment first off ought to be on enabling IT and the business to work better together to set the guardrails. Mm-hmm. Because the reality is what the maker needs to see is what they're allowed to do. And a lot of the confusion, for example, the fact that we allow people to see connectors they can't use is a huge amount of confusion. Being able to, again, back to the viral marketing, being able to present to the maker an environment that is already configured in a way that meets both the business policy and the corporate policy to expose things through our catalog. So, and I'll go back to the SAP example. I mean, the nirvana there is that I can go pull down a solution into my environment that lets me go get access to, say, materials management data that has already been pre-created by the IT team and agreed to by the business with the scope of who's allowed to use it. We enable more by putting guardrails in place than we do by leaving them open, right? There's a reason you can't drive through Mexico City. It's because nobody honors the traffic signals. But the more traffic signals you have and the more guidance you have, the faster you can go. And so I think it's a misnomer to say that adding governance reduces the speed of development. In fact, having a governance policy that is very clear about where the guardrails are allows you to drive faster. Nobody wants to drive fast on the side of a mountain without guardrails, but that's what customers feel like they're doing it sometimes. So let's be more focused on enabling business by giving IT the tools they need to comfortably expose assets, as opposed to saying, let's give makers more visibility into things that they may or may not be allowed to use. So we are getting there. A lot of this gets back to us taking the tools we already have I mean, most of the things I've been talking about in terms of building integration layers that are more useful by makers. So makers simply see functions that show up in Power Apps that access SAP with no knowledge of the underlying infrastructure. We have the tools to do that. We have a lot of tooling that's not used with a focus on enabling business through IT, as opposed to enabling makers to come up from the solution. We've done a great job, as Chris has said before. We have thousands of examples of creative people on the front line solving problems in very unique ways. The problem is when they want to start touching corporate assets that IT guards, if there are no guardrails, they are hitting a ceiling in terms of what they can effectively do in an organization. And when you sell somebody your job's on the line, if you let this data out, guess what? They're not going to let the data out. This is about guidance. It's not about technology, because we have great technology now. And again, if you look at what Ken's team is building going forward, we're going to get nothing but better. But we have to start saying, again, crawl, walk, run. What you can do today with what we have is this: build this way now. This will prepare you going forward for doing other things. It's not about whether we have the technology. We have the chops. We are enterprise grade. There's no question. It's not about convincing people. It's about giving them the way to adopt this, that they are comfortable letting the strings out.
Yeah, the only thing I would add to that is in the early days, to John's point, I think our marketing has been very much look at all this cool new stuff, right? And I don't think we did early as well of marketing the governance capabilities as we do now, right? There is a lot more visibility and discussion around the capabilities from the governance and side of things. I make sure to describe it just as John did. It is a control, of course, but I think of it as to build the guardrails, to put the safety in place, to put your makers in the padded rooms so their creativity is not hurting themselves or the organization, right? I don't want to stop them. I just want to protect them, right? They're not malicious. They're just uneducated, right? That's not a bad thing. We just give them a safe place to play and, let them go nuts and have a blast. I've shared with customers a lot, you mentioned managed environments. A lot of my customers are really smart and know that requires, the different licensing conversation, and customers, as a whole are going to do creative things to try to reduce costs. And so I've been reminding them lately is that there are countless stories of customers creating all kinds of value with this platform. There's too many to mention. There aren't any where they lost money investing in this platform. So one of our biggest consumers even said, you're going to spend more time, effort, and money trying to navigate around those things than you would if you just invested. Now, I know that's easy for me to say on this side of the table, but, we can come up with those creative strategies to help kind of evolve into, that full scale solution where, there's tons of opportunity to be had.
Chris, I like to say, look, if you're going to build enterprise-grade applications, you need enterprise governance and security.
100%.
You need to talk to enterprise. You need to talk to enterprise assets. You need to talk to SAP and SQL. If you're going to talk to those enterprise systems, we're giving you governance for free. We're giving you advanced governance and security for free. This is not. It's in the wrong order. You have said you want to touch your enterprise systems. So if you want to touch your enterprise systems, you need premium licensing. And guess what? When you made that decision, we're giving you the ability to manage and control those assets. If you're not touching those assets, the productivity stack, Office 365, has its own DLP. Of course, we have the same acronym for 50 things because that's what we do, but they have their own DLP that will tell you what's in that Excel file. You don't need us to do that. But if you're going to build touching enterprise assets, you need enterprise governance and security, and that's what we're doing with managed environments.
Well said.
And John, let me touch on this. So much goodness inside of here. Like I need another hour.
People don't generally use the term goodness after I talk to them, but that's okay.
Well, that's because you and I are friends, John.
And governance is rarely a short conversation.
Spot on. So I know we're getting close to about to wrap. So let me ask this question: secure by design and secure by default. John, you asked the question earlier, or you touched on it a little bit about some of these particular features and patterns that we may repeat. Copilot is a good example. It's an amazing technology, but we have heard, why are you turning this on by default? I would like to say that if we're building things, by design, and they are secure by design, then customers, you should rest assured that the things that Chris and John have talked about, if you put those in place or have those in place, that feel comfortable to allow those things that are enabled by default to gradually rolled out within your organization. Now, There may be some things that you may want to turn off, having gone through that myself in my former life. Admittedly, there's always something that we might want to turn off. But I like the way that, John, that you said it, and both you and Chris, about not just jumping off into the deep end of the pool without the guardrails. We absolutely provide you with the tooling, and governance is the avenue for you to choose to obey the speed limit, if you will, unless you're in Texas. So, Chris, John, any comments about our stance on secure by design and secure by default that you may want to just talk about?
Well, I agree with you that we give the tools. Like, for example, I work with a customer who went kind of the standard productivity route of saying, here's a bunch of connectors, enterprise assets, go build something. And after a month, they had built a couple of applications, but the applications weren't very usable, frankly, and they didn't really exercise the back end. We then took a team and we built an integration layer where we exposed the business process through those connectors. We hooked up app insights to track what was happening in the application at the flow level. And then we gave them a layer where they could see, create PO, look up product, these business layer things. And then the team in a week built 4 really robust applications. So by giving them guidelines, by giving them guardrails, by giving them something that was focused on the types of things they were writing, they became more productive. And we had visibility into everything they were doing through the App Insights interface. They had no idea on the back end we were tracking all that. It was like the speed gun for the highway. It was there. We were able to track it. And this is what I'm saying. We have these capabilities. It's a matter of saying, when you start building enterprise assets, how do you build them in a way that it accelerates the adoption, that I can go 100 miles an hour and I'm not worried about going off the road? That is the place where, from a field perspective, we're the ones who have to give a lot of that guidance because we're the ones getting beaten up by it, right? And it's not good enough to say, hey, thanks for the information and not calling them back, right? I mean, we have to be able to say, well, let's figure this out. And, again, what Chris and I like to do is take this feedback and come back to the product group. And frankly, they've been very responsive. I mean, we have seen that when we are able to take this feedback from customers and bring it back, it material affects the product and the speed at which we innovate in the product. So I am not the least bit concerned that over the next 12 to 18 months, as customers begin moving from crawl into walk mode and integrating these enterprise capabilities, that they're going to be able to do that with success because we're going to give them the information they need. Now, to your point about secure by default, part of this is as soon as we have a capability, they need to be looking at that capability and not saying we're not using that yet, or we're not concerned about that yet. Look at it now. Begin figuring out now. We're not just creating stuff because we think it's fun to write code. I mean, we're doing this because there's a specific reason. It's a foundational aspects that we're building, and they need to be adopting these things now. And so the only thing I would change, we turn things on by default, is that we allow anything we turn on by default to be scoped to a group or scoped in some way. It's fine for it to be on, but have it on with an empty group and let people add people to it, because it's the all or nothing approach. What we did with default routing, where you can specify a group that gets that default route. That's exactly what our customers want. They want to be able to control that distribution and not just say everybody's going to get a developer environment as soon as they go to the maker environment. So on this particular team, there has been an effort to go through and make sure that people can implement a crawl, walk, run strategy. But sometimes from again, I keep picking on Sean, but I mean, our marketing approach that says, let's drive viral adoption by giving customers viruses, which is their perception, is what's causing a lot of these problems, is that we just can't turn things on without any control, because the on off for everybody, the customers don't like it.
Yeah, and to help customers, right? John's mentioned crawl, walk, run. Whatever stage you're in, there are other customers in that exact same stage. We've got plenty of customers in crawl, we got plenty in walk, and we got quite a few in run, including this small software company you might have heard of called Microsoft. We're in that phase, and to the point of secure by design is that you're watching 5 guinea pigs that are used every single day to test those very features, right? If you're not aware, and I hope you should be, Microsoft likes to test a lot of things internally. So, speaking to all you listeners, right, that aren't Microsoft employees, we get features early. They test all kinds of stuff on us. We are the hamsters in the wheels trying all these things. The proof is in the pudding. We're going to make it secure for us before we even let you have it. Right. So we're really, really passionate about making sure that we incorporate that kind of stuff and take that into consideration. And I think that's not talked about enough, right? That's not included sometimes. to give Sean a boost because he's been beat up a little bit today, right? We've done a good job putting the governance story out there more often, right? I think that's a good thing. The only thing I would say is that when we talk about these awesome new features, it should include more about I don't want to say control over it because that's not fun, right? That's not the exciting story, but also that, throwing in the why it's secured by design, right? It does all these cool things and we're governing it by this manner, right? Like that is exciting to some people because it also gives them that comfort, that we're putting that together. And we're still learning that. There's some examples of, hey, this cool new feature came out. Well, now I got to figure out how to manage it kind of thing. So, I think we need to put more of that kind of information up front as a part of that, exciting new feature marketing.
Now, let's be clear. At the Power Platform Community Conference that's coming up, please do not attack Sean. Okay? Please.
I'll give him a big hug next time I see him, all right?
That's what he's afraid of.
Not just the Microsoft folks that are listening, customers as well. Please do not attack
He's
Sean.
actually like our biggest ally internally, but that's the best kept secret, I feel like.
I finally got to meet Sean. It was a fun time.
Like I do want to say something, and this is I kind of want to let you guys continue to believe that marketing has the power. But like between us, no, we don't have that. Like we wish we had that, but we don't. But thank you, John. Though I do appreciate that. I think as we wrap and I want to carry this conversation into the next episode because our producer is punching a wall right now for us to jump off the mics, is to think about the marriage between an educated admin or IT group, an educated user, and then what is the force that drives innovation more? Is it the educated admins that have enabled secure governance in their organization through strategy and policies, or is it the technically fluent makers and business process owners that want to do all these great integrations and really modernize their existing business processes and are like banging on the doors of the admins to say like, yo, I want to do these things, like there's all these great features and I know how to do it, like allow us to do it. So who has a greater voice in the room, and how, in your experience, how do we make those two things come together for a successful relationship in innovation and organization? So I'll leave on that cliffhanger, and that's the demand that John and Chris join us again. And I'm going to go get some Band-Aids and Gatorade, and I'm going to try to feel better about myself. So anyway, John, Chris, thank you guys. Really appreciate you coming on the show, and we'll chat more.
Thanks so much for the opportunity.